and they were throwing big chunks of concrete at the car, and they were breaking through the glass of the windows, and it's me and a couple other guys, and we're trying to kind of crawl down in the back. So that's when you realize how helpless you are, right, and how you really are at the mercy of a crowd like that. And there wasn't anybody coming to save us or anybody coming to rescue us. It was just us.
Welcome to the Cops and Writers Podcast. Your host, Sergeant Patrick O'Donnell, worked the streets in one of the nation's largest police departments for over 25 years. Ride along with O'Donnell and his expert guests as they help you navigate the oftentimes confusing and misunderstood world of law enforcement. O'Donnell and his guests on this show do not represent any law enforcement agency. The content of this show is not meant to be legal advice. If you think you need a lawyer, you probably do.
Hey, Cops and Writers, thanks for being here with us today for another episode of the Cops and Writers Podcast. I'm Patrick O'Donnell, and I'll be your host for today's show. This show is listener-supported, so thanks to all of you who keep the show going. I would especially like to thank those of you who are patrons of the show. Your generosity helps pay for the software, equipment, and my time producing this show. Yes, you too can become a patron for less than a cup of coffee or a pint of Guinness. Just go over to patreon.com/Cops and Writers. The name of this podcast is Cops and Writers. My guest on the show today, Todd Scott, definitely fits that bill. The conclusion of this interview will air next Sunday. Todd spent 30 years as a special agent for the DEA, being assigned to multiple locations across the United States and the world. During his time as a special agent, he took part in investigations leading to tons of seized illegal drugs and millions of dollars in illegal drug proceeds. He was part of the first group of agents to be assigned to Haiti for a long-term mission where he escaped certain death multiple times by the skin of his teeth. Todd has always had a passion for stories and writing and pursued this when he retired from federal service. He has authored 6 critically acclaimed crime and thriller novels. He's also a TV and film producer and screenwriter. His work includes the Lawmen, Reeves series, and is a producer and writer for the spinoff to the massively popular Yellowstone series, Dutton Ranch. I love talking with Todd. He has lived and is living a life that books and movies are made of. Now he's telling the stories. Todd Scott, welcome to Cops and Writers.
Hey, thanks for having me.
My due diligence, what I have to do first is thank the most incredible, the man, the myth, Steve Murphy, for the intro.
Yes.
He is one hell of a guy. He's a good friend of mine now, and we exchange guests as far as, hey, I think that guy'd be a good fit, or hey, she'd be awesome on your show, that kind of thing. And so first things first, I got to thank Steve.
Yeah, well, Steve is great, and it's interesting that we were there at DA together, but our paths never really crossed, and so we didn't actually get to know each other till after the fact. And I knew of him, of course, and I knew Javier as well a little bit too, or knew of Javier a little bit as well too. But it was again after we had both retired that we finally actually sat down and had a long conversation. And we obviously had knew a lot of the same people, and had just barely missed each other. But obviously he's a great guy, has a fantastic career, and he continues to do a lot for all of us who carried a badge and gun and have retired. So
yeah, I don't think you'll find a bigger cheerleader for law enforcement than Steve Murphy. His heart's in the right place, and he says all the things that we're thinking. And yeah, God bless him. He's a good guy. And it just blows my mind because how big is DEA? It's not that big.
No, it really isn't. I mean, and I don't know what the current numbers are, but you're talking 4,000, 5,000 agents, right? And a little bit more than that support personnel. So
that blows my
really
mind.
Not that big.
Yeah, that blows my mind because like Milwaukee, the size of city of 600,000 people, we're supposed to have close to 2,000 sworn. So it's like half the size of the DEA. That's like all over the country and world.
All over the world. Yeah.
Yeah, that's mind blowing to me. But hey, let's start at the beginning. Where did you grow up, and what was some of your most impactful influences, do you think?
Well, I was born in Paducah, Kentucky, and grew up in Louisville. And I had a pretty traditional kind of suburban upbringing. My mom and dad were married, still together now. I have one sister. She's quite a bit younger than me. She's 7 years younger than me. But I mean, I went to public school in Louisville, and I didn't really have a lot of exposure to law enforcement. My dad uh, started as an accountant and then went on to kind of get heavily involved in business and finance.
Mm.
And my mother was a stay-at-home mother. But it was really once I kind of got into college, and started thinking about what I would do after college, and had a few experiences in college that kind of opened my eyes to this idea of getting into federal law enforcement specifically. Now, I had an uncle who was a local narc, actually, out in Paducah, or out near Paducah. And, he had a motorcycle and a beard, and, I had a few conversations with him. So, I had little influences like that, but it was only once I got into college that I really started to think about this idea of carrying a badge and a gun for a living.
How would your friends describe you when you were in high school and or college?
Probably kind of a dork. I mean, I wasn't. I was well liked. I had friend groups that kind of went across the entire spectrum. But growing up here in Kentucky, I wasn't really tall enough to play basketball, which was a big deal.
Right.
I wasn't a big dude to play football, so I really wasn't involved in sports. I was in the band, right?
Me
And
too.
so,
Yeah.
right. So I was in the band, and in college, I was took a lot of English courses, which actually paid off much later in life. But I thought about being a writer, So I mean, I was kind of, average in many respects and dorky. I didn't have any family in the military. I didn't have any family in law enforcement. It was not stuff that I did. I wasn't an ROTC or anything like that. So I think most people who found out later that I became an agent and did all the things that I did would have been shocked,
Yeah.
because that was not the sort of guy that I would have been in high school, right? I would have
Sure.
been the, accountant. I would have been the lawyer. I would have been all those, maybe a writer, because I did do that a lot. But I was kind of fortunate to take that kind of 180-degree turn,
Sure.
and really changed my life.
Cool. Now, where did you go to college?
William and Mary in Virginia, second oldest college in the country.
That is so cool because maybe about 5, 6 years ago, yeah, probably a little more than that. We went to Colonial, was it Williamsburg?
Williamsburg.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you ever have a chance, I gotta say you gotta do it. And
Yeah.
we walked through William and Mary, and I'm like, this is so cool. This is very old school, pun intended. And it is just, there's people wearing period, like clothing, and the town crier is hear ye, hear ye.
Hmm.
And we took a cruise on a schooner.
Hmm.
And it was just the whole experience was so neat, and it's just something I think you should do. But going to school there, it seems kind of idealistic. It's
Yeah.
just it's so
Yeah, no,
cool.
it was idyllic, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and to me, when I walked on William and Mary's campus, I didn't know a lot about the school when I visited. I'd actually gone to Georgetown University, and I was looking there, and I went to UVA, University of Virginia, actually, which is where my younger sister went. So in between those two campus visits, my dad was like, "Well, hey, let's go check out this place, William and Mary." And I'm reading the brochures about it, and he had actually read more than I had. But the minute I walked on campus, I'm like, this is where I want to go to school.
Mm,
It looked like a college campus. It
it
had
did.
ivy on the buildings, and
Yeah.
and I just thought it was beautiful, and it was big but not overwhelming.
Right.
And it just felt, I mean, sometimes you just know. I have three daughters, and I did a lot of college tours with them as they were growing up. And sometimes you just know. And I was very fortunate. I walked on campus, and I knew this is where I wanted to go to college. I was fortunate enough to get in, and had a great 4 years there, and still go back, as frequently as I can. And that time at William and Mary is what kind of then propelled me to everything else that I did.
Yeah. Well, you must be a smart cookie because not everybody gets into that school. So
Yeah, no, I like to think I'm pretty smart. Maybe not so much anymore, but I sweated it. I sweated getting in as an out-of-state student. I sweated getting in, and I did. And again, had a great 4 years there. Loved every minute of my time there.
yeah, my wife is from Virginia,
Mhm.
from Radford.
Yep.
pretty close to Blacksburg, where Virginia Tech is. And
Yeah.
my late father-in-law was the biggest Virginia Tech fan you'll ever meet. He
Right.
always had an article of clothing, either a belt, socks, something that had Virginia Tech on it.
Yes.
Go Hokies. It was I absolutely I love the whole collegiate thing, and college sports is just you get wrapped up in that. I just think it's one of the neatest things ever.
Yeah, I was wearing a William and Mary shirt yesterday, and my youngest daughter went to Georgia Tech, and she actually
Oh,
just graduated a week or so ago, week and a half ago,
yeah.
and she was an equipment manager, a team manager for the football team. And so for 3 of her 4 years, she traveled with the football team. So she went to Clemson. She came up here to Louisville when they played at U of L. She got to go to their bowl game. She went to the Pop Tarts Bowl,
Oh, is
and
that cool?
yeah, so she really had a great college experience getting to do all those Division I sports sort of
Ooh.
things in kind of a unique position. I mean, she's down on the field, she was on the defensive side of the ball, and really, really a cool experience. And we got to kind of live it vicariously through her and see her on TV. See her on TV all
Yeah.
the time, running up and down the sidelines.
That is so cool. Oh my gosh.
Uh,
That's awesome. So you're in college. Is that when you were thinking DEA, like towards the later part of your college
it,
career?
yeah, toward the very yeah. Actually, I applied for DEA as I was graduating my senior
Mm,
year in college. And what happened is was taking a lot of writing classes. I really thought I wanted to be a writer. That was kind of what I was focusing on. I was thinking about getting leaving, graduating and getting an MFA in writing and creative writing. But to earn a little bit of money, I was working at the Williamsburg Inn, which is there in Colonial Williamsburg. It's kind
mm.
of a five-star, resort. And I was working there on nights and weekends. And one of the things about Williamsburg Inn is a lot of dignitaries would come there. It was kind of used as because it was, just a couple hours from DC. They'd host a lot of official dignitaries and events and all those sorts of things. And I got to meet quite a few Secret Service guys because they
Mm.
were there and they were always staying in hotel rooms. And I did room service, so I was always bringing them sandwiches. And these guys, and this was the early '80s, so they're still smoking in hotel rooms. It
Oh,
seemed like to
absolutely.
me. They had the shoulder holsters and the mustaches, and they looked like cops, right? They looked like Secret Service sort of cops. And just kind of chatting with these guys and getting to see them, I was like, this is a whole different world, that I had never really been exposed to. But I grew up on shows like Miami Vice and Hill Street Blues
Oh,
and
yeah.
all those sorts of
Good
things.
stuff.
Right. And so I think all of that kind of coalesced during my time in college. And as I was seeing these guys doing this room service gig, I was like, you know what? How do you become an agent? How do you do what you're doing? And they gave me some pointers, and I, was able to go to the library. Of course, you didn't have really the internet back then,
No.
so, but I had to kind of do the old-fashioned research and started applying. And really, I decided that the DEA, to me, when I read about them, I'm like, well, this is like the coolest. It's like Miami Vice.
Sure.
And I'm going to grow my hair long, and I'm going to have a shoulder holster, and I'm going to do that. So that's
And
what I did.
and you're gonna have a Ferrari and live on a
Eh,
sailboat. That's
Yeah, right.
and
That
have a
was my
speedboat
dream.
right next to it. Yeah.
Right. It didn't pan out that way, but that was my that was my dream. And so I started applying, and I had by the time I graduated, I was still going through the process. It's very difficult to get in the best of circumstances, and in that time they were going through various hiring freezes and this,
Mm,
that, and the other thing. So after I graduated, went up to DC, worked in the private sector for a year or two, even started law school because I was still kind of waiting to go through the
okay.
process. And I was in my second year of law school, finishing up my second year of law school when DEA knocked on the door and said, "We're ready to take you." And so I took a sabbatical from law school. I figured I'll go to the DEA Academy, and if I complete it, great. If I don't, well, I guess I just go back and finish law school. And that's what I did. After my 2L year of law school, I went down to DEA Academy in Quantico, Virginia, and did my 17 weeks. That's what it was then, 17
Yeah.
weeks there, and was able to successfully graduate and figure out where I was going after that.
Now, what did your parents say when you said, "Hey, mom and dad, I'm gonna be a DEA agent, just like Sonny Crockett on Miami
Yeah,
Vice"?
they thought I was out of my damn mind. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I think it took them a while to even understand what it meant.
Okay.
Because I was already kind of in law school, so they thought it was law related, and I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm not really gonna do the law side of it. I said I'll have law involved, but
Oh
I'm
yeah.
gonna carry a badge. I'm gonna carry a gun. I'm gonna kick in doors. I'm gonna run around and arrest people. And I don't want to say they struggled with it because they've always been pretty supportive of me, but they didn't quite understand it. Like they couldn't put this picture of me that grew up with them, and like to write and do all these kind of things that suddenly wanted to go run around and fight and wreck cars and do all the stuff they had seen on TV. So
Yeah.
I kept. It's like they almost kept thinking I would just suddenly change my mind and go back to law school, right? And but as each year went by, and then it became a career, they realized that it was what I was committed to doing, and so they were supportive, but they definitely thought I'd gone a little bit crazy.
Now, did you ever think of any other federal jobs like Secret Service, FBI, anything along those lines?
No, I really didn't. I was aware of all of them.
Right.
Legacy Customs, was still a thing back there, Treasury and all that. But and I can't quite remember what my thought process at the time was, but I only applied to DEA. I was like, these guys sound like they do cool stuff.
Okay.
And I didn't want to wear a uniform. Like I didn't, and obviously later in my career, I worked with tons and tons of guys who, had been, uniformed officers and whatnot. But it was to me, I wanted just to wear regular clothes and do undercover. Honestly, it was like I just wanted to do what I saw on TV,
Sure.
right? Like on Miami Vice. I'd like to say I had some patriotic streak or some, it wasn't that. I just wanted to do something cool. And the DEA guys, reading their brochures and talking to them when I started to apply, I'm like, this seems to be these guys are cool and they do cool stuff. And so I kind of took the plunge on, one agency, one mission, and rolled the dice with them, and it worked out.
Now, well, maybe not. I know, like, if you were FBI, usually they require some life experience first. They want a 4-year degree, obviously, and then they want, they back in that era, they wanted lawyers and accountants,
Right.
big time.
Right.
And or, you were a cop, wherever for like 4 or 5 years, right? I think they took military experience as well.
Yeah. Well, and DEA too very much, wanted you to have, there wasn't kind of one way in, but there was, I didn't really fit many of the ways, right? I didn't have prior law enforcement, hadn't been in the military. I didn't really have an accounting, or finance background, which is, obviously one of the things I considered.
Yes.
So a lot of the boxes I could check, I didn't check, other than I had a 4-year degree. And I was really, really eager to do it. And I don't know. It'd be fascinating to go back and talk to the guys that, kind of sat on my panel interview, which is kind of the last hurdle I
Yes.
had to get through. Um, but and I didn't think I was doing very, very well in the panel interview because they kept throwing um, kind of these bizarre scenarios at me, all which involved me shooting somebody.
Oh.
Right. And of course, I didn't even grow up hunting, so I never really messed with a gun, but all
Right.
of the practical scenarios involved me shooting someone. And I can remember in one of them, I said, well, okay, do I have my gun with me? And they're screaming at me. Of course, we don't really do panel interviews this way anymore,
No,
but
no.
they're yelling at me. And it's in a hotel room, and they're all smoking, and cigarette smoke everywhere, and they
Nice.
got all coffee cups.
Sure.
And they're like, of course you have your gun. You're a damn federal agent. You always have your gun. And I said, okay, I shoot that son of a bitch then. Or something very much to that effect. And the room got really quiet. And the lead, guy said, what the hell did you just say? And I doubled down. I said, I shoot that son of a bitch. And then they looked at each other and they looked at me. And I can remember that guy sat back in his chair and he said, all right. And that was kind of like the end of the panel interview. And I walked out and you went to a payphone and called my parents. I said, "There's no way I'm hired as an agent, right?" Like I cursed in the interview. I fell apart. I talked about shooting people. It's ridiculous. And then 2 weeks later, I got the letter in the mail. Said, "You're just the sort of candidate we're looking for."
Oh, this guy's
And
honest. I love it.
right,
Yes.
right. And so I don't know what it was, but I think they saw someone who was bright and eager, and and at the end of the day, at DEA, they're going to teach you. Most of these federal agencies, they're going to teach you what you really, really need to
Oh,
know.
sure.
And they probably saw an empty vessel, and like, this is a guy that we can mold into exactly what we want him to be. And he's the least federal agent looking guy on the planet.
Well,
So
perfect for undercover. Yeah,
perfect for undercover. So
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, now how many people were in your class, your academy class?
Well, it's interesting because I kind of got in on, they had the hiring freeze, and they had to quickly put together classes.
Okay.
So there was only seven. Typically, you want a class about 50. There was only 17 in my class because they
Oof.
couldn't get guys cycled in fast enough,
Sure.
right? Over the hiring freeze period, guys got married or they did other things, and
Right.
so. But I basically had to go take a quick physical. I passed another quick polygraph. That they kind of did it all over a couple-week period, and all my information was still good, and I was still in shape, and everything. So I was one of the guys they could get ready to go really quick. And I
Mm.
was just in law school, and I had just finished up my 2L year, so it was almost the summer. And so instead of going to clerking, which is what I had been doing, I was just like, I packed my bags ready to go. And so we started with 17 and graduated 14, as I recall.
Okay.
And back then we were at Quantico,
Mm.
and we were still in the FBI building. So,
Okay.
nowadays DEA has a separate facility at Quantico, but they have their own dorms, their own buildings. It's kind of on its own. They only really share the firing ranges, shooting ranges, and some practical stuff. But back then, you'd have one floor of FBI guys, one floor of DEA guys, one floor of FBI, and
Ah.
we shared all the same facilities. And
Now,
and
were were you one
but
of the youngest in your class?
I was one of the youngest, and I was, again, one of the guys that had kind of the least prior experience.
Right.
Most of the guys in there had, some were like current stockbrokers at the time. There was a couple of guys who were accountants. We had
Sure.
several guys who were, local cops who had come over. So yeah, I was kind of an anomaly. There was maybe only, I think there was a guy who was from Food and Drug,
Oh,
and maybe a guy
okay.
from HUD, something like that.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and then there was me, and I was, again, kind of an anomaly. The only way I know how to do anything in law enforcement is how DEA taught me. They taught me how to shoot. They taught me how to write my reports. I mean, I learned everything. I didn't have any bad habits to break because I didn't have habits at all. I
Right.
didn't have anything, right? And so the minute I walked, into the academy grounds, I was like, just show me what you want me to do. If you want me to stare at that wall for 2 days, I'll do that. And back then you could tell the difference between DEA and FBI because the FBI guys were in their polo shirts or button down shirts, and cargo pants or slacks, and we were in BDUs, kind of black
Okay.
BDUs and gray t-shirts. They shaved all of our heads. It was still very paramilitary.
Sure.
Our academy was back then. Less so now, but that's kind of how it was back then.
Right. And I imagine you probably didn't have much trouble with the law classes since you were fresh
No.
out of law school. You probably could have been teaching it.
Yeah, no, the law classes were easy for me. The writing was easy. The
Yeah.
court writing and stuff was easy. And, I got there. I wasn't a great shot from day one, but I got to be good pretty quick because, again, I didn't have any bad habits to break. And I just said, you teach me and I'll figure it out. And, the practicals, I took to all that. And I was a very willing student. And, that served me well then, and it really kind of served me well through my whole career.
Yeah, like with the firearms thing. I remember when I was in the academy, there were some recruits that I was with that never even held a gun before. And they were
Right.
really nervous about it. And our instructor, they were great guys. They're all ex-SWAT. The
Mhm.
guy that I had was a SWAT guy. I think he was a Vietnam vet. He was a Marine. And he actually had a heart transplant. So he couldn't
Mhm.
be like on active duty anymore. And he was so good. He's like, you know what? If you never touched a gun before, I'm going to make you a good shot. If you're a good shot, I'll make you a great shot. And he said, you know what? If you've never touched a gun before, he says, good. You don't have any bad habits.
Yeah.
He says, I'll show you the right way. And
Yeah.
it's like, and the light bulb went off in my head, and I'm like, wow, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And DA's instructors then and now are really good. I mean, they are really good. And you talk about, not having shot a gun before. I said we started 17, graduated 14. Well, we lost a guy really early, like in the first week and a half, because he didn't realize that the job required you to kind of carry a gun like all the time. And so when they gave him, when they issued our firearms, he was kind of like, well, what's this? Like I have to deal with this. Right.
What do you think? It's gonna be a feather like sword or something?
I don't know. So the next day they came in. Of course, we had our names like taped to the front of our little desks or whatever. And they came in and they ripped his name off the front of his desk. And they're like, he won't be joining us anymore. And they packed him up and sent him out. So, it's a different era maybe. But I loved every minute. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I loved it. And that was, it served me well.
Yeah, I got on when I was 30. I was on the waiting list for 4 years. And I had never worked a job that was Monday through Friday. I never worked a job that I got paid for overtime. And I never worked a job where I had 2 days off in a row. I thought I died and went to heaven. I'm just like, okay, so I run around, you yell at me, I do a bunch of push-ups and sit-ups, and I sweat a lot, and you got to learn a bunch of stuff, but you're paying me for this? Wow, I get to shoot guns, drive around really fast in a squad car. I'm like, this is awesome. Oh my
No,
God.
I thought I was getting over, right? Like, I couldn't believe that our government saw fit to give me a badge and a gun and a car and release me out into the wild, right? Like I kept thinking somebody was going to wake up and say, "Get that guy out of here." Um, yeah.
So your first duty station, where did you go and did you want to be there?
I went to Los Angeles, and no, I didn't
Oh,
want to be
cost
there.
of living is the first thing that pops into my head. Yikes.
Yeah, well, yeah, I didn't have any money, and so it really almost didn't matter where I went from that standpoint. But back then in the academy, they brought out a list of offices, and you kind of try to argue amongst yourselves where you want to go, and you kind of rank them and all this sort of stuff. And very shortly after we put our list in, like the first two offices I had on my list, they got taken off for what reason. So I knew my first two choices weren't even available to me anymore.
Okay.
And then back then you would stand up in front of the class and they would hand you an envelope and you'd rip open the envelope. And that's where you were going. Like you had to see it at the same time that everyone in the class saw you see it. And I ripped open my envelope and it said Los Angeles, and I'm like, oh my God, yeah, I hadn't picked it. It wasn't a place I'd imagined going. I'd never been to a city that big. I'd never been that far west, actually, my entire life. And so I was a little bit shell shocked. Not gonna lie about that. But I kind of approached the way I had the academy, which is, you know what, I'm gonna go out there and figure it out. And that's what I did. So I started in Los Angeles, and this would have been, 1995.
Okay. Now, was it what you expected, or was it totally different? What's the craziest thing you saw when you were a cop? My first week on the job, a guy running at me with a butcher knife. He just killed his brother over the last hot dog. That's chapter 1. There are 33 more. Police Stories, The Rookie Years, just launched. Available now on Amazon. Search Police Stories, Patrick O'Donnell, or click the link in the show notes. Back to the show.
It was everything that I expected and totally different, right?
Okay.
Like, I mean, back then in the 90s, the Southwest border for DEA was kind of really blowing up.
Sure.
And so I was kind of at the forefront of that. There was so much that I learned at the academy, and yet so much I didn't know,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
Until I got out on the street. Of course, this was before, cell phones. We got a cell phone years later, and it was like the backup guy got to carry the cell phone. It was, years before each of us got issued a cell phone, right? When I got on the job, guys were still doing reports like they were dictating them, right? And there was still a typing pool in some of the
Oh yeah.
offices, and we had pagers, and it's a wonder that we caught anybody at times. And I drove around L.A. with a bunch of quarters in my center consoles to use payphones. And my kids don't even know what payphones
Right,
are, right?
right.
Had to use a Thomas guide to get everywhere because you didn't have, your phone
What's a
to
Thomas
map.
guide?
It's a huge, thick book, a spiral notebook that everyone who lived out in LA for years would carry because the city was so big. It's the only way you could find anything. So you'd open the Thomas Guide, and somebody'd say, "We're at Thomas Guide page 38 AAKK," right? So you go to page 38, and it would be like a grid, and you go down
Wow.
to A, B, C, C, D. And if it was big enough, you'd be down like the double letter. So you go to AA and cross-reference it to KK, and that would be the street, right? And we used to do operational plans. They would Xerox the appropriate Thomas Guide pages and put them on your ops plan to tell you where to go. So you're driving around, literally looking at these books or these pages, trying to figure out. And I think I got lost going to every single dope deal my first year in LA. I was always a guy late because I was trying to figure out where I was, but. So it was an amazing time to be out there, and I was in a general enforcement group. Some of our groups were broken down by drugs or gangs or whatnot, but I
Yeah.
was in a general enforcement group, so I got to be exposed to a lot of things. And I got involved in a very unique case early on that took me traveling a bit. It involved boats and smuggling, and I got to be on boats, and I got to be on planes, and I got to go all around the world. It was everything that I had imagined, a federal agent could do.
Yeah.
And I got to do it right at my career. Now, I didn't have, a cool car. I had a Ford Aerostar van, and I didn't have a boat, but I lived by the ocean. I actually lived on the beach in a very, very small apartment. So I did get to do that. And I had a mullet, and I had a shoulder holster, and I acted like I was, in Miami Vice, and got to do some great cases.
That sounds really cool, actually. Now, were you married at the time?
I was not to my current wife, but
Okay.
I was married and had my first daughter when I was out in LA. Actually, all three of my daughters have been born in different states, which shows you the
Wow.
amount of moving that I did.
Yeah.
And I had a great career there and worked some massive cases, and decided my wife at that time. Um, was very fluent in French, and DEA was setting up the office in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, which is they speak French and Creole there,
Right.
and it's a country we knew a little bit about because when I was in law school, she'd worked at a law firm that did Haitian political asylum
Mm.
claims, and so when I told her that Haiti was available. Figured I'd solved the drug problem in Los Angeles, so I'd go to Haiti. She convinced me that we should take a foreign tour, and so that's where I went after LA. I did 2 years in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, down in the Caribbean.
So I'm gonna guess there wasn't a lot of competition to go to Haiti. There wasn't a lot of
No,
people with their hands up going, "Oh, pick me, pick me. I
yeah, no,
really want to go there."
I think I, sent in my request, and I think that night they called me, and they're like, "Are you sure you want to go? Like, you're sure?" Because we can have you in language school tomorrow. And what they were doing is we had a lot of guys do, TDYs there. It was actually the office, such as it was at that time, was kind of managed out of Puerto Rico. So the seven of us they sent down there were going to be the first agents to live full time in the country, and so it was kind of groundbreaking that opportunity to start in that office and set that office up and kind of get our diplomatic and law enforcement, and initiatives off the ground there. But it's an amazing country. It's interesting history. I worked with some very dedicated law enforcement folks there who had almost zero training or support. It was one of the more difficult places I've ever worked and lived. But I'm glad that I took the chance to do it. Again, when you join an agency like DEA that has an international footprint, it's a federal agency with an international footprint, I thought it would be I'd be missing out if I didn't take all the opportunities that
Sure.
I had, right? And one of them would be living in a place like Haiti, and seeing things that I would never have seen if I didn't raise my hand and go do them. So
Very cool. Now, you're going to Haiti as a DEA agent. Your wife went with you and your child?
yes. Hmm.
Okay. Now, what was the mission? Like, what was your job? What are you trying to accomplish by going to Haiti?
Well, at that time, but actually two things. One, we were trying to do actual legitimate law enforcement activities there. Haiti was kind of a way station. At that time, you had a ton of Colombian cocaine, coming off the Guajira Peninsula, for instance, and coming through Haiti, either via, light aircraft smuggling or, ocean smuggling. Every type of that, variety of smuggling you can imagine. And so that dope would be brought in to Haiti, and then you'd have Colombians living in country who were responsible for then moving it, helping it transit from Haiti on into the United States and also Europe as well, even at that time. So, we were there running active law enforcement and, investigations, because you had a lot of investigations from, say, Florida and stuff that directly impacted or were directly related to what we were doing in Haiti. And you had significant, at that time, Haitian traffickers, guys that had moved up from just being smugglers to also kind of running their own significant, kind of drug mini cartels, I guess. So we were there doing that, and we were also there to train and support the Haitian National Police. And
Mm,
that was to teach them how to do the drug investigations that we were doing. And that was, knowledge, training, support, financial funding in some respects. And so I helped set up a kind of a maritime task force. It's a little difficult to do because we didn't have a ton of boats, but got them additional training and additional support and stuff like that. So we were doing active investigations and also kind of doing mentoring.
Now, it's kind of a precarious position because how much jurisdiction did you have in Haiti?
Well, you have as much jurisdiction as any country wants to give you, and you're there under
Right.
diplomatic cover. So we had the black passport, so we were actually attached to the embassy,
Okay.
and we were allowed to carry weapons and stuff in Haiti, and we did. Um, but generally, our mandate was to let the Haitian National Police, lead the enforcement operations, and then we support them.
Okay.
Um, but what leading means, what supporting means, and in a time where we didn't have a tremendous amount of oversight. I mean, we were just kind of out there on our own in a
Right.
very, very difficult country that didn't have great infrastructure. I'm not so sure much of what we did back then, um, is stuff you'd want to do nowadays. You know, uh, I wouldn't say we were cowboys, but we definitely were on our own, and we definitely were expected to take care of ourselves and keep our counterparts safe. Because the fact is we were better trained than all of them. We had better material than they did. And so, it's a unique time. There's a lot of intel agencies, all three-letter agencies working in Haiti during that time.
Mm.
Um, so it really opened my eyes to drug smuggling on a massive scale in the intel community on a massive scale, and you're interacting with those agencies as well as the military and about everyone else. So it was a
Now, what
fascinating
year was
time.
this about?
This would have been around 1990. I think I got in country around late 1998, 1999,
Okay,
and I
so
was there for about 2 years.
it's before 9/11, and
Mm.
before 9/11, a lot of federal agencies did not play well together as far as sharing information and intelligence. That
Yeah,
was
but that wasn't the case there because we
okay.
were all um, we all needed to help each other.
You're all in the
You
same
know,
boat, huh?
yeah, we were literally and figuratively, right? We were
Right.
all on the same boat, so never had any problems with that there. And I have been generally fortunate throughout my career to have pretty good relationships with the other federal agencies. My time on the border, working with HSI on the border, they're kind of the 800-pound gorilla, and we had to do a lot of kind of navigating
Sure.
that. But by and large, pretty good cooperation, and most of my career has involved, multi-agency task forces and that sort of thing,
Okay.
state, local, and federal.
Right.
So we didn't have problems with it in Haiti. I heard stories, anecdotes of us in other countries, not quite the same cooperation and sharing,
Right.
and obviously in certain parts of the U.S. as well, but that wasn't a problem for me in Haiti. We all had to help each other because nobody was going to survive if we didn't.
I got it. Now, Haiti, from what I have seen and videos, etc., it's probably one of the poorest countries in the world.
Hmm.
And just basic stuff like, I don't know, running water, electricity is, that's, we take it for granted. It's not so much there. And I imagine the Haitian police aren't paid that much. And
Yep.
that when you have very underpaid police or law enforcement, that's just a breeding ground for corruption.
Yeah,
I mean,
corruption was a huge problem, an
yeah,
absolutely huge problem.
could you kind of steer us towards like what did that look like and what would you do to kind of like combat that?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say I trusted every Haitian cop that I work with, but I did try to develop close enough relationships with enough of them that I at least felt I could work comfortably. But it was a real concern. I mean, look, they're making pennies a day,
Yep.
and I lived in country, and I lived in a home, and I had guards on my home. I had walls, and I had guards on my home. So I, kind of could retreat to the safety of my, compound at night in a way they couldn't. I mean, they just had to go back out on the street, back into their own home. So I was very cognizant of that, and understood the kind of power dynamics and the differential that we were dealing with. Corruption was a problem. It was endemic. I saw it. I'd like to say every guy I worked with was up front, but that wasn't true. But I was able to work with enough of them,
Okay.
and whether you're a cop in Haiti or a cop in the U.S. law enforcement, I mean, at some level, you generally got into it for some of the same kind of basic reasons, and there's kind of a brotherhood. You know it, right? When
Right.
you're out there and we're in difficult places and it's just us. Um, you grow close, and I was able to grow close with the cops that I worked with, but I was very cognizant that we were working in a different situation, and I
No,
had safeties and protections that they didn't.
okay. Now, as far as safety, your own personal safety and your family, do you have any stories of where things got really hairy? Because, from the videos and stuff that I'm watching, there's like roving street gangs,
Yeah,
it's pretty much lawlessness.
yeah,
Uh,
and I got caught. I got caught in those. They called them manifestations, right? But they were they burned the tires and blockade the roads. Got caught a few of those very early on in my tenure there. We got stuck in a huge one, and we weren't in an armored vehicle at the time, and they were throwing big chunks of concrete at the car, and they were breaking through the glass of the windows, and it's me and a couple other guys, and we're trying to kind of crawl down in the back seats, and we were armed. But you realize in that situation where I mean, you can't shoot everybody,
right,
right?
right.
And so that's when you realize how helpless you are, right? And how you really are at the mercy of a crowd like that. And there wasn't anybody coming to save us or anybody coming to rescue us. It was just us. So we didn't shoot our way out of that, but we just kind of tried to inch our way through, right? Try not to drive over people. Everything's
Right.
on fire around us. The windows are broken out. Uh, and so that happened a couple of times in country, and we got various threats. We were going to be poisoned. Our houses were going to be attacked, and this was on the Colombian side of it,
Okay.
the Colombian traffickers. But what's interesting is we also had a kind of a level of protection in a way, because we were diplomats
Yeah.
and we were law enforcement. And after you know Kiki Camarena, a lot of the organizations at the cartel level understood that snatching a federal agent or killing a federal agent was not good business.
Right.
You
You
know,
you don't want the
and
spotlight on you.
yeah, you don't spot that on you. And so, we had and that's what I understood, that I had a level of protection most of the time that my counterparts did not, simply because of who I was in country. And everybody knew who I was. You're not hiding it.
Yeah.
So, we had a lot of danger, and I got caught up in dangerous things. but I also had kind of a weird level, kind of a force field a little bit,
Mm.
where I wasn't worried as much about getting snatched off the street or something, all things that happen to various, cops that I work with and all the Colombians, right? We're getting snatching each other on and off the streets. But that really wasn't a worry so much for me because I, was kind of a diplomat and I would have
Okay.
been too much of a business hazard.
Now, what was one of the biggest seizures or cases you worked when you were down there?
We got about 1,000 keys of coke out of a vessel. We had been tracking it with some kind of unique tech at the time, tracking
Okay.
it all throughout the Caribbean for months and months and months. And so to seize all that coke out of that vessel after months and months of work was really cool. I mean, you know, I got planes down there, I got boats down there, the semi-submersibles. But that case was, so seizing dope actually wasn't that difficult in a place like that. But that case was cool because we had to track this vessel for so long,
Okay.
and we're able to, when it went dead in the water off the coast of Colombia, we knew what it was doing,
Yeah.
and to be able to have the Coast Guard get it down for us and get all that coke off of it was cool.
Wow. Now, what court would try that case?
That ended up being tried in Miami.
Oh, it did. Okay. So it was in the U.S.
Yep.
That's neat. Was that one of your biggest of your career?
Um, well, I mean, for a coke seizure, it was one of my biggest coke seizures. But the case that I worked in LA, that maritime case involved 4 tons of hash.
Oh my God.
And so if you're talking sheer big, and at the time, it was one of the biggest undercover cases in DEA history. I mean, we were in boats, we were smugglers, boat smugglers. We were in the Pacific, we were on all these ships, we did all this stuff, and we got 4 tons of hash, which was being delivered to. Some of it was coming to Orange County, California. Some of it was going up to Canada. Some of it was going to um, Australia. And so
God.
I went to all those places.
Yeah.
So for nearly 2 years, I was on planes, trains, and automobiles. I was all over the world as we were dealing with this load.
Four
So
tons.
4 tons of hash, yeah.
So what do you do with 4 tons of hash? Once, you're testing X amount or,
Yeah.
I don't even know how you weigh something like, I mean, it boggles your mind.
Yes, and we hand carried a lot of that hash because we got it at sea and it got thrown to us from one vessel to another, and so we had to pack it, carry it, pack it, and then once we got it stateside, we had to unload it
Oh
all
my
again
God.
by hand. Yeah, it's not easy. Anything 4 tons of anything isn't easy to deal
Right.
with, and that was true with that. But that was a really cool case. It took me all around the world. And ultimately, stuff like that's incinerated, and but you just kind of have to take your representative samples, and yep,
Sure.
that's hash. Yep, there's another bale of hash. Yep, that's hash all the way down. Um, so that's the miserable part of big seizures like that. It's like
Yeah.
we used to say: big cases, big problems; little cases, little problems; no cases, no problems. Um, and I consider lucky I got to work some very big cases throughout my career. Lots of small cases too, but
Right.
I got to work some very, very big cases in some interesting places.
What was one of your biggest money seizures? And what are the circumstances behind it?
Um, it's interesting. Some guys were big money case guys, and I don't know, my most of the crooks, I mean, out of that hash case, we ended up with a lot of money eventually, out of bank accounts as we kind of tracked, ferried it all down.
Sure.
And we kind of took that dope from them. We were supposed to be interior smugglers. So we took their dope and basically held it hostage until they paid us more money. And so they were flying in Deutschmarks and yen and all
Wow.
sorts of money from all over the world to give
Yeah.
back their dope to them. But and so that case had a lot of money over time, and I've worked cases that have had a lot of money kind of trickle in over time out of
Mm.
bank accounts and stuff. I think 1.6 million may have been the largest seizure. I'd have to go back and look, but actual cash,
Yeah.
I had a couple of, 500,000 to $600,000 hits, and a 1.6, and I think that was on the southwest border when I was working in Arizona at the time. So after Haiti, I spent some
Wow.
time on the southwest border.
Damn. So, kind of backing up a little bit, again, Haiti is one of the most, poverty-stricken places you can go.
Mhm.
What would the motivation be for snitches? Because obviously you have to rely on, street level intelligence as well. What was there? Were you paying them? Were they
Oh yeah,
working off something or what
it'd be
was?
money, and yeah, and
Okay.
then at the time, depending on the snitch and the work, the possibility of getting out of Haiti
Okay.
and getting to the U.S. But
Oh,
again,
okay.
that all comes down to kind of what they were doing and how they were doing it. But they were taking it, no matter what we could give them, they were taking tremendous risks every day. The informants, human intelligence that we were working with in a place like Haiti, were taking daily risks to deal
Sure.
with us because it's just a difficult place. We stand out, and so to have any, meet people, have any sort of conversations, do anything like that, was very, very problematic. But we were able to do it.
Yeah, I'm thinking about when you were under attack in your car. i- Is it because you were white and you just kind of stood out, or did they know you
No,
were DEA, or was it
no, no,
just
no. And I
random?
think, yeah, those sorts of things that you're talking about a mob mentality,
Okay.
and the mob wasn't mad at me, neither as an embassy person or as a federal agent or even the color of my skin. There was a lot of problems in Haiti, political, socio-political, environmental. And so most of those sorts of protests had very little to do with me. I
Okay.
just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And
Very
in
much so. Yeah.
yeah, and in a country like that, there was a lot of wrong places and wrong times just because of
Okay.
the nature of it.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So your career with the DEA, how many times did you have to move around? How many work locations did you work
I
at?
moved 10 times in my career,
Whew.
which is a little on the higher side, although most guys do move quite a bit. Once I kind of became, a group supervisor and then an ASAC, and then eventually became, the special agent in charge of my own division. As you move up, those moves and you know promotions entail moves. So if I had just wanted to stay in the same office and not promote, then I wouldn't have had to move as much. But it's not unusual for most agents to move at least, a couple, three times. But yeah, I did 10 across my career.
You know, I love motorcycles. I was on a motorcycle. It was a law enforcement motorcycle ride.
Hmm.
And I buddied up with an FBI agent. And we were just talking and I don't know, he wasn't on for very long and he already moved like two or three times.
Yeah,
And that just opened my eyes because it's always like in the back of your head and it's like, holy shit, I'd have to move my entire family. That's no easy task.
right.
Yeah.
A lot of task force guys that work with us, who love working with DEA, don't want to become DEA agents because they don't want to move, they don't want to pick up their
Yep.
families and move, and the amount of moving that can be part of a DEA career, um, got to be kind of a sticking point later in my career. Not, I was kind of already down the rabbit hole on that, and I just kind of that was how I was kind of raised in the agency, so I
Yeah.
expected those moves. But in terms of bringing people on board and retaining some talented folks, the amount of moving or the threat of moving or the places you might have to move to became a real problem. And DEA kind of changed how we onboarded people and how early we told them where they might go, because
Okay.
nothing's worse than sending a guy through a very expensive training program at the DEA Academy, and then he finds out he's going to Brownsville, Texas, and to have that guy say, "Well, I'm not moving to Brownsville, right?
Sure.
My wife won't move with me to Brownsville."
Right.
So they tried to front load a lot of that
Mm.
information and those choices early, and then they kind of did move to a more regional hiring model, so that way you could kind of pick a region to some extent.
Okay.
So I want to stay out in the Southwest or the Northeast or
Uh,
whatever. All to varying degrees of success, but and also kind of changing some of our promotion paths upwards. So those past did not require as much moving. Families just became more complicated over the years. Spouses have, careers of their own,
Right. And kids in school and
good in
their
school.
friends and yeah, that takes a toll. And I mean, we moved when I was in high school from Chicago to this little rural city in Wisconsin. And I thought I landed on Mars. I can't imagine doing that like 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, moving
Yeah.
again and again and
Yeah,
again.
that ugh.
And when I got on the job, that was just expected. And they used to, kind of, it's an old joke, but if DEA wanted you to have a family, they would issue you one, right? Um, and, but I think we got a little more nuanced about this
Mm,
over time, as we should have, and tried to understand where modern families were. And so, I never used my moves in my career as an example of what every guy should do. I just explained what I did and how I ended up that way. But I understood the toll it took on people. And I still toll it took on me. I mean,
sure.
I got divorced, and all three of my kids were born in different states. And after my divorce and then remarriage, I spent a lot of time flying back and forth or driving back and forth, and getting kids to me or me to kids, right?
Sure.
To still be involved as actively as I was in their lives. So I'd never used my career as the exemplary, DEA career, but I did use it as a kind of a teaching point. Like this, you have to pay attention to this stuff because you sign up for this career and your family does too.
Yeah, absolutely. And for correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding if you want to promote, a lot of times you have to move.
You have to move, and that's again, as I was, broaching retirement, we were trying. I was on a kind of a panel, a commission that
Yeah.
was looking at ways to not have those many moves, so you could still promote,
Mm,
right? Because we were losing, we were getting guys we wanted to promote, who
yeah.
should be supervisors, who are like, yeah, I don't want to get down that, I don't want to get down that train track and end up having to move. So we were very much looking at ways to allow guys to promote that did not require the number of moves that I ultimately, undertook.
Gotcha. Now you moved around quite a bit. What was your
Mhm.
favorite duty station or not so favorite? Why?
Um, I've tried to find something I liked about all of them, quite honestly. I mean, I
Okay.
did a couple different tours in Texas, a couple different tours across Arizona. I was in LA, I was overseas, I was in, Virginia. I was in Kentucky twice. It was very rare. I got to come home to Kentucky kind of in the early to middle part of my career, which is rare to come home. And then I got to come back to Kentucky again near the end of my career when they made this a division, and I became the special agent in charge here. So I liked everywhere, or at least I found something to like about everywhere. I think the place that I was most surprised that I enjoyed was El Paso, Texas.
Okay.
You're right across the border from Juarez, and this was at a time when it was, a lot of problems in Juarez. And the city admittedly doesn't look real pretty from the I-10
Okay.
freeway, I'm not gonna lie. Um, but we were responsible for some other parts of Texas, as well as Las Cruces, and Albuquerque, New Mexico. So we had a little bit of Texas, a little bit of Albuquerque, uh, New Mexico, and then we were right there on the border. But I ended up loving living there. It was just kind of a very interesting environment. Did some great work. I was there as an ASAC, Assistant Special Agent in Charge. I had great
Okay.
groups, great agents. Spent a lot of time down in the Big Bend area, which ultimately came up in my first novel. And El Paso is a really neat city, and it actually ended up loving living there quite a bit.
Well, all good things come to an end. And what was the end of your career like for with the DA?
Well, I got to go out exactly how I guess I would have hoped, which is they made a new division near the very end of my career, and they kind of took the states of Kentucky, Tennessee, and West Virginia and merged them together and made a division, and they called it the Louisville Division. So they actually opened up a divisional office right here in my hometown where I went to where I grew up, went to high
Oh,
school,
wow.
where my parents still live,
Yeah.
and I was able to become the special agent in charge the last 3 years of my career here in Louisville. Got to set up. There was another, new SAC just before I got there. He kind of got the office doors open, and then I spent my time here building out a whole brand new office. We moved from a small district office to the divisional office. Really kind of built the division up so that way then I could turn the keys over to the next guy. But I got to build up a brand new division. 15 offices across 3 states. Great task force guys, and we have a mandatory retirement age at 57.
Okay.
I was about a year shy of that, but staring it down, and I had kept talking that maybe I'd go ahead and retire before they drug me out the door at 57. And my wife, my second wife, she came to me one day and said, "Well, you're going to retire now because I already planned the party and I already got the tickets, flying all the kids in, and they're non-refundable tickets." So she called my bluff, and so I retired just about 11 months short of when they would have thrown me out of the door. But I got to go out kind of when I was ready.
Yeah, and you went out on your own terms, and that's
Exactly.
there's a lot to be said for that. So
Yeah.
good on you. Now let's get a little philosophical. You have a unique lens that you can look through that most people don't.
Mm-hmm.
And I always like to ask some of these questions of people in your position is like, what do you think the biggest threat to the United States is right now, and what's the role of illegal drugs?
Well, I mean, I'm very much a believer that I'll kind of do the second part first.
Okay.
I mean, I'm very much a believer that law enforcement has a role in the drug problem. There will always be some level of, or some types of drugs that you'll need enforcement for. Even if you made all drugs legal tomorrow, for instance. I mean, these criminal organizations aren't going to suddenly become legit and open up yogurt shops, right? I mean, they're,
What?
they're still right. They're still massive criminal enterprises. And by the time I retired, most of these, the cartels were involved in multiple, not just drug smuggling, but human smuggling and about every sort of type of organized crime that you could imagine. So law enforcement will always have a role to play in, our substance abuse problem. But the fact is, it is a substance abuse problem. So I think, demand reduction, education, prevention, all that has a role to play well. If we didn't, have the demand problem that we had in the United States, then these cartels wouldn't have gotten the foothold that they do. So, I'm philosophical, in my own way about it. I'm proud of the career that I have. If I could go back and do it all over again, I would. I would absolutely do it again. But I also understand that there was a certain limit to what I could achieve and that law enforcement could achieve, with this problem. And, education, prevention, rehabilitation, all that has a role to play in it as well. And I'd like to think throughout my career I was able to help in those areas, even though my primary job was carrying a badge and gun. So, drug addiction, is one of the biggest problems facing the U.S. today, but clearly it's not the only one.
Thanks everyone for joining me and retired DEA special agent, writer, producer, and all-around cool dude, J. Todd Scott. We're just getting started with Todd's incredible stories and what really goes on behind the scenes at the Dutton Ranch. Stay tuned for the exciting conclusion of this conversation next Sunday. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss this one. Well, that wraps up another episode of the Cops and Writers podcast. If you haven't done so yet, can you take a minute and rate and review the show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts? If you have already, thank you. As always, thank you for all of your support, and, of course, let's be careful out there.